Hey guys, what's up? This is Andrew Price here from blenderguru.com, and in this video tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to create the motivational poster that you can see in front of you right now. Now, I'm not sure where I originally heard the phrase break the mold, but it was one of those phrases that really stuck with me ever since I heard it. And I originally had this very design sketched out on a whiteboard next to my desk to sort of inspire me to think outside the box and create new work. And I always wondered how it would look if I created the final effect in Blender. So I gave it a shot, and this is the result. So I thought I'd do a tutorial on how to create this exact effect in Blender. So I'll show you the finished scene first of all. So this is what it looks like. Now, it's made up of two text objects. You've got like the outline there, as well as the this UV textured text there. I'll show you how to do that. We've also got two main particle systems. We've got this one here, which is throwing rubble out onto the scene. We've also got the rubble on the ground itself. And also the ground itself is also UV textured with like a concrete cracked sort of pattern. And as well as that, we've also got a little bit of compositing as well. So we've got, we've got Sharpen Filter, Motion Blur, a Vignette, as well as some color correction as well. So this tutorial will go over a few things. It'd probably be a little bit advanced if you're a beginner, but I'll do my best to explain it as well as I can, and hopefully have a little bit of fun along the way. So let's start by opening up a new scene. A lot of people have been requesting that I show my key presses as I press them and record it onto there. Currently, well, up until now, I didn't really have a way to do that, but I found a new script that someone directed me to. It's called the, Screencast Key Status Tool. So this is a script that you can get off blenderartist.org, specifically mainly just for tutorial creators, and that will allow you to now, whenever I press a key, you can see that it's now showing up on the left hand side there. So that will hopefully come in handy for those of you watching at home. Alright, so on to the tutorial. First thing we're going to do is create the text. So add text. Now you can make your motivational poster say whatever you want. Mine is obviously going to say break the mold. So now the font that I'm going to be using is one called, let's see what it is, Aka Chen. Okay, now so that's like a big, bold, sort of in-your-face sort of font, which I found worked quite well for what I wanted. Now for the settings, we're going to give it an extrude value of about 0.3, something like that, just to make it look three-dimensional. And what else? Also, we're going to give it a depth. Let's try a depth of 0.005. And that'll just give it sort of an edge there, just for when the light reflects off it. Yeah, just gives it a nice, cool little effect there. Alright, now to give it a sort of like a, sort of make sure that the text doesn't blend into the background too much, we want to give it like a dark edge. So to do that, I'm going to create a duplicate. Okay, so a duplicate of that text. And I'm going to set the width value to a 0.02. Okay, so that's just a little bit bigger. And I'm also going to decrease the extrude amount. Okay, so you can sort of see the kind of effect that we're going for there. So just to give it just a little bit, make the text stand out a little bit more. Okay, so once you've got that, now you've got two text objects there. We're just going to duplicate that just 3 times. For each of the words. Okay, so this one is going to say mold. I'm not sure if my caps lock is on. Doesn't look like it is. Alright, mold. Now the reason I recommend you separate the words into separate text objects is just so that you have a little bit more control over the line spacing in between each of your words. Otherwise you sort of have to go with whatever the font defines for you. Yeah, I just found it works better this way. Alright, okay, so that's looking pretty good. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just rotate this by 90 degrees, holding down Control. So it goes in 5-degree increments. And that now makes it basically flat with this, this ground grid there. Now, if I go into front view, number pad 1, and then press Control Alt 0, that will now snap the camera to that location, and that allows me to just easily position the camera square onto the text as such. Alright, now I'm going to give the outside text here a material. Just going to give it a very dark, sort of harsh grey color like that. I'm going to set the specularity to something a little more subtle, so it's not very obvious. And I'm going to apply it to these other two objects. So holding down Shift and selecting the last object again, and then press Control L, Materials. Alright. So now we've got the basic materials for that set up. Now I'm just going to go on to the basic lighting of the scene now. So let's see. For the lighting, what we've all it is basically just a spot lamp. Excuse me. So add a spotlight like that, and just position it behind the camera and facing the text as such. Now I'm going to enable ray shadows, and I'm going to set the distance to a little bit, whoa, not like that, a little bit less to what it is as standard, something about 10, about there. I'm going to set the energy to 10 as well. All right. Now to enable, so you can actually see the shadows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a plane, like so. And next what you need to do is get a drink of water, because my voice is crackling. Oh, that's better. All right, and so from there, just make sure the ground lines up with the text like it should. About there, that looks okay. All right, now the other thing I'm going to do is make the background completely white, like so. All right, and let's have a look at how this renders as such. I'm just going to save it first though, just so that it does, in case it crashes. Okay, I'm not sure what that is. Okay, I've got a cube there showing up. All right. Okay, so it's looking pretty shocking at the moment. Now, reason for that is it's currently, this plane underneath is lit by the lamp. Now, all we really want is for the shadows to appear on the plane itself. We don't actually want any of the lighting to affect the ground. So a quick way to fix that is to go into the material settings for the plane, and then just go down into the shadow settings and select shadows only. And that'll make sure any specularity, any diffuse, anything like that will no longer be displayed. Now if we hit render, you'll see, I'm not sure if you can or not, but the shadow, it's only the shadows that are now being cast onto the plane there, which is pretty faint. I mean, it barely makes up anything. All right, now to make sure that you can actually, so we sort of get like a darkened effect where the text meets the plane, I'm going to go into the world settings and enable ambient occlusion. And for this blend mode, we're going to select multiply so that it actually darkens the scene. Alright, so let's have a look at how that looks now. Alright, so it's looking a lot better. So now down here, it's a lot more dark, and it looks like the text is actually a physical part of the scene. We've got this sort of like blown out part up here. That can happen if the spotlight is a little bit too low. But yeah, you can fiddle around with the settings a little bit. But yeah, that's basically how we want it to look. So what I'm going to move on to now is the actual texturing of the ground. So for the ground, we want to actually give it a, whoa, what is this? Java. Always. What does it always want? For the ground, we want to give it like a concrete texture, sort of to make it look like the text has smashed into the ground. So we want like cracks to ripple throughout this this ground plane. So to do that, there is sort of a bit of a problem, because with that shadows only option applied, we can't actually add any textures or anything to it. So we actually need to create a duplicate of the ground, okay? So now we've got two ground objects there. It can get a little bit confusing, but for this type of effect, it is required. So basically, I'm just going to select the top ground object there now. So we've got both material, both planes are now using the same material. So I'm just going to delete that one right there, and I'm going to add a new material. Okay, so it's a fresh new material. Now what I want to do is UV unwrap that plane. So we're going to do that very quickly right now. UV image editor, and then select U, unwrap. Okay. Now for the actual texture, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hand make a texture so that we can sort of get the exact look that we want of like something smashing into the ground. If you can find a texture straight off the internet that looks like like a bubble sort of crashed into a ground, by all means use that. I couldn't find any, so I have to hand make my own. Now to do that, I'm going to use a texture off cgtextures.com. It's in the decal section, and you'll find a bunch of alpha masked images here. And the one that we want is this one right here called Decals 32, all right? And then you need to go to your image editor. I'm going to use Photoshop because I've got it, might as well use it. And then just load that into the image editor. So you've got something like this. And then basically what you need to do is take the lasso tool and just sort of lasso around where you've got that texture like so. And then press Control C. Alright, and then you can disable the layer if you like. And then just add a new layer. And then basically just press Control V, and you've just got that one little snippet of the cracks there. So in order to get that realistic rippling sort of effect, you essentially just need to, pressing Control V many times, just create, just using your own imagination, a sort of look as though something has crashed into the ground. So this is entirely reliant on how long you spend on it as to how well it's going to look. I just used this one thing and just duplicated it many times, and then using the eraser tool, I just removed a few parts just so it doesn't look completely uniform and boring. But yeah, I'll leave that up to you to work out how it works. My finished result looked like this. Okay, so quite a few cracks there, things going on. So I'm going to assume you've gone and done that now. So I'm going to just add that image to the UV image editor. Where is it? This one here, concrete crash. And once that loads up, you'll get this really weird, sort of look like newspaper effect over the whole thing. Don't worry about that. It's supposed to look like that. And we basically want to just align it so that center point right there is right there where the text is. Now currently that's going to be very hard to do because that's just one solid object. You don't have any sort of reference thing as to where that is in relation to the plane itself. So to help, I'm just going to subdivide this several times like so. And now if I just select those vertices right there, you can see right there, that's where the actual impact should appear. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale this upwards like so, just to something about there. Okay, so that's looking it's looking pretty good. So I've just using the P tool, I've just sort of made those vertices there red just so I can see where it is in relation to it. But yeah, there you go. Alright, so that's looking okay. So now that is completely UV mapped to that plane there. Now for the materials, what you need to do is obviously you need to first of all add that image because it's not going to show up in your render unless you do that. So let's do that now. The image, concrete crash. You need to make sure you check pre-multiply. It's very important, otherwise you'll get sort of a fuzzy look around the texture, which doesn't look very good because it's an alpha mapped texture. The next thing you need to do is turn off color and turn on alpha, okay? And set the mapping to UV, obviously, because it's UV unwrapped. All right, and then we're going to go in the transparency settings and set the alpha all the way down to 0, set specularity to 0, and then set the color to black. And you can see up here in this little image edit, this little preview window, you can see how that is affecting the material. All right. Now the other thing is, if we just rendered this right now, you'd see a really weird, awful effect. Actually, I'll just show you. Just render. Yeah, the ground looks completely black. Now the reason for that is that we've got two grounds on top of each other, and this one is casting a shadow on the other one. So to remove that, let's just turn off traceable And now if we render that, you should see it turn out the way it should appear. Exactly like that. Perfect. The other thing you might want to do, if you get sort of like a tiled look sort of effect, just go into the, where is it? Image mapping. Oh yeah, just make sure that clip is clicked, and that'll make sure that it doesn't get any tiling effect. Alright, so that's how it's looking as at the moment. Now I'll show you how to do that same effect for the text itself. Alright. So, it is a little bit more advanced, but it is fairly easy to unwrap text, okay? First thing you need to do is you can't apply a UV unwrapping to this object because it's a text object, okay? We need to turn that into a solid mesh. So to do that, press Alt-C and then select Mesh from Curve. Alright, now do that for the other 3 text objects, and then select all 3 of them and then press Control-J, and that'll make them the one object. Okay, so you can now see that that's just it's behaving like a normal mesh now with vertices that you can move. Alright, now to UV unwrap it, it's actually fairly easy. All you need to do is split the UV the window there into UV image editor, and then in front view mode, okay, so we're looking at the text from the front, select all vertices, press U, and then select project from view. And there you go, you can see it's now completely UV unwrapped it square onto the camera, and that'll allow you to apply some cool texture mapping. If you wanted to create textures down the side of the text, you will need to do something a little bit more advanced to get that working, but if it's just from the front on, then this method works perfectly fine. Now, if you wanted to hand paint textures onto this, which we do want to do, you need to export the UV layout, okay? So that basically when you take it into the UV image editor, you've got an outline around the text as to where it should appear. Now, first thing I'm going to do is just define how big to make the actual image that we're going to export. So I'm going to set 2000 by 2000, and I'm going to export UV layout. Now, over here, you've got the 2 formats, EPS or SVG. EPS, I found, is the only one that works with Photoshop. I think SVG works better with GIMP if you're using that. But there you go. Let's just, you can call it any name you want. I've done this tutorial a few times, so it's number 4. EPS, there we go. And let's select Export UV Layout. And then open your image editor. And then select the image that you just created, if I can find it. Break the mold. There we go, that one there. That little thing will pop up. Let's have a look. Alright, and you get an image that looks like that. Now, best thing is you've got the layers over here, so you can just turn down the opacity so that you can just sort of faintly see the text, but it's not taking up the entire thing. Now, to make that sort of cracked concrete effect on the text itself, I just did the exact same method we used for the plane before, and that was basically lassoing around the original, where is it? Around this this texture here, and then going over to it and pressing Control V, and then again, just I press Control T just to scale this little snippet down, and then I just did that repeatedly for each of those text objects. Okay, so it does take a little while, this step, and obviously the longer you spend on it, the better it's going to look. I spent probably about, I don't know, half an hour on mine. It still didn't look as perfect as I'd like it to, but you know, it worked well enough, so I just left it as that. I'm not going to bore you by doing it all right now in front of you. I'll let you have a crack at that. I'll just show you the finished result now. So this is what mine look like afterwards. That's with the text overlay right there. Make sure you turn off the text overlay before you save the image, by the way, or else you'll get the actual text overlay as part of the texture, which you don't want. But there you go. So to save it, all you need to do, go Save As, and then select PNG as the type, and just save the texture there. Then once you've done that, go back into Blender, select Image, Open, in the UV image editor there, and then select that texture that you just created in your image editor. And if you actually did this properly, unlike what I have, then it will match up perfectly with what you've just done in the UV image editor. Mine won't, because I'm using the texture from the text that I created in the past, so it doesn't match up perfectly, but it works well enough just for this tutorial. So that's fine. We're going to leave that as that. We're going to give it the material now. So very basic, just add the image as you would normally. Let's go image. Select it from the list there, making sure you click pre-multiply, of course, to avoid that fuzzy look, which is very awkward. And in the mapping, select UV. And then if you go to this preview window there, you should see something like that. We're going to turn down specularity so that it's you do get some light reflecting off it, but not too much. And let's have a look at that now when we render it. All right, so it's looking pretty good. It would look a lot better if I UV mapped that properly the way it should, but it's looking okay. So now I've got the smashed concrete cracked effect on the ground as well as on the text itself. Now let's get on to the fun stuff, creating the rubble. That is something a lot of people, I've had many tutorial requests from people requesting how to do that effect. So I'll show you very quickly how to do it. It's very, very easy. As soon as I figured it out myself, I was like, wow. I started using it all the time. So to create rubble on the ground, what we're going to do is we're going to create 5 separate rocks, okay? And basically what we're going to do is we're going to use particles to then use those 5 rocks repeatedly over an object, okay? It's called using particle instances. All right, so first thing we need to do before I confuse you too much, add a cube, all right? And this is just going to be a very basic, and you'll see what I mean when I say basic, basic shape of a rock, okay? Now, again, if you want to go into a lot of detail, you can. Obviously, your rocks are going to look a lot better than mine right now. But it's basically just, I say basically a lot, don't I? You want to make sure that they all just look a little bit different than the other, so you don't get a completely repetitive look to your rocks. You can create 4 or 5 of them. If you want to go, make sure there's definitely no repeating things. You might want to create like 10 or something like that. But yeah, so once you've got 4 like that, what you need to do is you need to put them into a group. So let's go, whereabouts is that? Yeah, here. So we need to create a new group first, okay? So this is in the object settings. And in the group part, click the plus arrow right there. And then this will create a new group there. And let's just call this rocks. And you can see that the outline for that object now, it's normally orange. It's now changed to a green. That means that it's now part of a group. So now we're going to select each of those rocks one by one and select the group name there like so. Okay, I might make that one a little bit smaller. There you go. So now that's all part of the rocks group. Okay. Now with this it's a little bit hard to see, isn't it, with the material so dark. I might just increase that just so we can see what we're doing for this step. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the particle panel there, and I'm going to add a new particle system. Okay. Now we're going to set the type as hair. All right. A little bit confusing. It's not going to appear as hair, but that's what we need to select. Now what we need to do is turn down the normal to just something a little bit smaller, something like that. And the main setting you need to note is down here in the render. Okay, normally if you hit render now, you'd get some hair particles sticking out of the ground looking pretty ugly. If you change it from path to group, we select that and then select rocks, you can see, I'm not sure if you can, if we zoom in a little bit more, that it's now using that those rock objects. There we go, it's a bit better. It's now using those objects over there in that group across the entire plane. So really cool, really easy effect to achieve. If you increase the randomized size as well, it creates different size there. I'm also going to enable Object X randomization so that they all spin around a little bit, so they're all a little bit different to each other. And also in the render section here, I'm going to enable Pick Random, and that'll select any one of those objects randomly and spray it across the object. Now currently, you've got rubble all over the entire plane, okay, which you obviously don't want. You only want it surrounding this object here. So how do you do that? You use what's called particle instances, and that allows you to define where on the mesh the particles will appear. Okay, now currently it's using the default setting where it decides it for you where the particles go. So let's go ahead and turn that to 1. I set it to 0 once before and I got some weird results. So I'm going to set it to 1 and then go down here. You've got object mode. Let's change that to particle mode. Okay. Now you probably won't see anything changed, but if you press T to bring up the toolbar here, it'll allow you to select a brush. And then once you've got that, you've got this little circle appearing over your cursor. You can actually paint where you want the rocks to appear on your object. Really, really cool. And then once you've done it, and you can select the amount to paint on there. If you want to go, rapid fire and just spray them all over it, you can do that. Oh, it's a little bit too crazy, maybe. Now, if I press object mode now, I'll probably get. Oh no, that's pretty good. Yeah, there you go. So that's. I'm surprised that works so well. All right. So yeah, that is a very, very quick way to add rubble to the scene. There's probably too few objects there. What I might do is just decrease the size of them. And then in particle mode, let's just add a few more rocks to it. Let's just spray this around a little bit. It helps if you add the rocks right near the text, so it sort of hides where the text meets the plane. Just a little tip there for you. Go back into object mode. And there you go. So it's looking pretty good. And if you want to apply like a material or texture to the rocks, you can. I think I did just give it like a cloud texture or something like that. Just helps seal the believability of the rocks. All right. So once you've done that, let's now move on to the spraying of the rubble. So in our finished image, I showed you there's sort of rubble, which is sort of dropping from the text itself, sort of looking like it's just hit the ground, and there's still rubble spraying off the text. So to do that, I've selected the text object there, and I'm just going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm just going to scale it like so. Okay, so just sort of a little bit like that. And now what I'm going to do is add a new particle system. And let's go down here. We're going to turn off emitter. We don't want this object to show up in the render. The reason I've used a separate object instead of that is we don't want the too much rubble to appear in front of the text. So I've just created a separate object just for the particle system. Now, if you go to the render settings here, again, we're going to select group and then select rocks again. Okay, select pick random. And now if we press, it's actually really small there, so you can't really see it. Let's increase that. Now you can see you've got the rubble streaming out of the text object there. Now if you set the rotation to something a little bit more random, then you get some more cooler looking results. I'm going to select, where is it? I've already collected pick random, there you go. Increase the randomized size to maximum so that each of the objects appear a little bit differently to the others. And the other thing I'm going to do is increase the normal to 2. So it sort of sprays it out a little bit more. And the random factor to 2 as well. And that'll sort of spray it outwards a little bit more. Now the other thing I'm going to do is set the start to -5. So that means at the start of the animation, you've already got rocks already appeared in the scene. And the end value to 1. And that means you're going to get all the rocks appearing at once. All right, now let's have a look. Yeah, so you can see that's sort of how that looks. Looks a lot better than it's sort of trickling out of there. Looks a little bit weird. But yeah, now you might want to experiment with the size of it. How big you want these chunks to appear. I think mine was around about that size. That's looking it's looking pretty okay to me. So we might leave that there. Let's have a look at how that renders now. So you got the nice cracked concrete texture there. The rocks are now appearing as rubble on the ground. We've still got that concrete texture applied to it, although you can't really see it that well, but it's looking okay. And you've got the rubble in the background as well. Now, the one thing you do need to do, we're going to do some compositing now. So the actual, the scene is pretty much finished. So I'm going to enable vector blur there. So if you're doing motion blur, you need to enable vector in the layer settings. So that's in the render panel there. Select vector. I just noticed with the rendered image there, I think the UV coordinates are actually around the wrong way, where it's sort of back to front, which is why it's not showing up as well. So I'm just going to go to the UV image editor and just sort of check, just see how it's showing up, if it's showing up properly or not. Okay, yeah, you can see it's back to front. So you can see if I select that text there, it's not matching up the way it should. So that can happen sometimes. Just be careful of the way you UV unwrap things. Make sure it's right. Alright, so that should look a bit better now. Let me move that over. Alright, there we go. Alright, now, yeah, as I said, once you've selected vector, you do need to re-render the image to enable it to calculate the speed of the particles and any object in your scene. So enabling vector, once you've done that, you need to re-render it. Okay, so that's now done. Let's switch over now to the composite, and you can see just down there the cracked concrete texture is now showing up a lot better than it was before, because it's now round the right way. So let's press Control left arrow, and that will switch you to the compositing layout. I'm just gonna make my workflow a little bit easier here, and we're going to enable use nodes, okay, and that'll enable us to start doing some cool stuff in the compositor. Those of you that have bought the wow factor will recognize a lot of these steps. For everyone else, I'll do my best to explain it now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enable a sharpen filter, okay? That's the first thing I'm going to add. I'll just enable a viewer node here, just so we can see what we're doing. If we enable this to sharpen, the sharpen filter will basically take the textures, the main contrasting elements of the image, and make it appear sharper. The default value is 1 for that value there. That's way too much. Usually you don't want to use more than a 0.2 value. The reason you use the sharpen filter is just to make the textures pop a little bit better than the way it was before. So that's what it was before. You can see that it looks very blurry down there, like those cracked textures there. And then when you enable the sharpen filter, it just makes it pop a little bit more, makes it stand out a little bit better. Alright, so once you've done that, what I'm going to add next is the vector blur. So go to filter and then select vector blur. And now let's add viewer nodes. We can see what's going on. Now, you need to you can see why we enabled the vector setting before in the layer settings. That's now because we've got that little blue dot there. That means that it's now calculated the speed of each of the objects. So just connect that to the node as well as the Z as well. And now you can see each of those objects now have a motion trail behind it. It's a bit too much for what I like. I'm going to turn that down to a 0.5. I'm also going to enable curved, so you get blur in front of the object as well. It's something a little bit important there as well. Alright, so once you've done that, I mean, yeah, you can experiment with what sort of settings, increase the samples a little bit, I think, to 50, so you get better looking motion blur, but that's looking okay. What I'm going to enable now is a vignette. Okay, now the vignette will basically create like a sort of a blackened, darkened border around it and allow you to actually focus on the center of the image. So it can create a very powerful effect. Now the exact layout for this, the idea behind this vignette came from Mike Pan. I saw his screenshot that he posted, really cool method. So basically it's just adding a lens distortion node right there, turning the distortion all the way up to 1, and then creating a math node, plugging that in there as such, and then zoom out a little bit, and then select greater than for this operation. And if we add a viewer node like such and set the value for that to 0, and now I'm going to add a blur node. You can see it might not make sense now, but you'll see why in a second what I'm doing. I'm going to increase the blur to maximum, set it to fast Gaussian, and you can see now you've got a blackened edge around the outside. And now if we add a mix node, and we take the output from that blur node. Hope I'm not confusing you guys too much. And if we set the blend type to multiply, that'll take the dark parts of this image and apply it over the original image. Add a viewer node. If we set that to 1, you can see it in full effect. Now the edges are darkened. The center is now completely white and allows you to focus more on the text itself rather than the irrelevant border. So that's it's a little cool effect there. The other thing I'm going to do is currently it's just black and white. It's a little bit boring. So I'm going to give it some color very quickly by adding a color balance node. So let's plug this in there. I'm going to get another drink of water before I choke. Excuse me. That's better. Okay. And then, so this, without getting too technical, the color wheel works. This right-hand one over there, that'll define what color to make the luminant value, so the white values of the image. So if I make that blue, let's set that to the viewer node so we can see what we're doing. That'll just make the white values slightly blue. And then this middle one here will be the midtones. So if I set that to a brown color, then that makes the gray areas a little bit orangey red. This looks pretty cool. I'm going to leave the black values as that because that's, actually I might, let's try and increase that to, let's say 2. That'll just make sure nothing is completely black for the image. Just a very subtle effect there. But yeah, so that's looking, it's looking okay. So that is, that's essentially the end of the tutorial. You can see there's a whole range of different things you can do, applying Rubble, motion blur, things like that to sort of just make the text, the point or the advert, logo, whatever it is you're creating, just to give it a different sort of a different look, make it stand out more. I'll just show you the finished render here. There was a couple of things I added to my image which were different to the one I used in the tutorial. Just for the sake of brevity, I've just left it out. But I've added a texture to the background. So if you go to the world settings, let's see, world, here we go. I've got 2 images just set to multiply over the top of each other, like so, like that. So those 2 images there over the top of each other, and you can see in the background there, you've got the texture just applying over it. That's just a few other things. By all means, experiment with this tutorial, create something of it your own. Yeah, just have fun with it. There's a lot of opportunities out there for typography in Blender. But there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you've taken something from it. And that's all from me. Thanks very much for watching.